Alright, so the goal of this video at this point is to get it to the point we can lay out the motor location and the transmission location. Which means we need to grab some tools and we need to get this thing down to frame. Alright, so at this point, we're torn down to frame, and this is the stock clutch that's for the AYP chassis, and I really would like to be able to keep this here instead of having to manufacture my own. But later on, I'm going to show you that there's some quibbles with this. Right now, we've got this motor in place, but there's some issues. We can't just mount it up right where it is right now, because this is the height of the hood, and this is the height of the motor right now. So we need to take this whole assembly and we need to drop it down into the frame, except we've got our steering in the way. So the steering's got to go forward, the motor's got to go down, then the problem is the clutch is going to be in the way, and I'll show you why. So if we have Jesse bring the camera around over here, and everybody please give a thank you to Jesse. So, as it is right now, we're going to probably be running, I believe I'm going for about a 10-inch pulley on the front. This is a 9. So, if I put this 9 on here in its general location, if I take this and I drop all of it down and into the frame, first of all, I've got to figure out what to do about the frame and the pulley. Second of all, by the time I drop this down into here, as it is, it's passing over the top of the frame. But once I drop it down into the frame, it's going to be running through inside the frame rail. And this is the other side of where my clutch comes across. So I'm going to have to take and figure out an idler pulley assembly, because this is where the clutch comes through. I'm going to have to figure out an idler pulley assembly that comes up and over the top of the clutch, somewhere right about in here. Now the problem is, I can't do any of this whatsoever until after I get the transmission in. Because the transmission, the pulley side of it, is going to set up exactly where we need to line up the pulley side of the engine in the front. So what we have here is we have the GT6000 side plate that I cut off, and we're going to use that as a template right here in order to be able to drill out all of our holes. We've got the original clutch bolt right here, which should be able to line up somewhere in this area easy enough in order to use the GT6000 double clutch that comes stock. Now, I've had a lot of you end up sending me some emails about why didn't I just take and slice the GT6000 frame off and fish plate it and weld the two frames together and call it a day. The thing is, I'm working to build this within the rules of the racing group that I plan to run this with at the drags. So in the drag racing rulebook, you can extend your wheelbase, you can modify the frame as far as adding structural stuff to the frame, but you have to use an original lawn tractor frame from front to back, back to front, however you want to say it. The original frame rails have to exist. You can move your front axle up, you can move your transmission around in where it is, but the original frame rails have to still exist. You also cannot widen the frame. It needs to be the original stock width. So that's the reason why it is that I'm sticking to putting the transmission inside of this. Now, this is pretty self-explanatory. I basically just take this stuff off and I put this up against here. I template it through the bolt holes. I drill some holes, and then we go from there. Now, let's take a look at the two transmissions. This is what's going into it. This is a 633 Roper, and this is what came out of it. It had a 5 or a 6-speed MST. These are what I really prefer for running in the mud mowers and stuff like that. If you're looking to go and find a tag on one of these, it's right here underneath this. And if this tag is missing, the easiest way to go and figure out whether it's an MST or not is 1, 2, 3, 4 ribs on the bottom. So if it has 1, 2, 3, 4 on the bottom, it's an MST. If it has 3 ribs on the bottom, then it's a 930 for 3. And if it only has 2 ribs on the bottom, then it's most likely a spicer of some sort. The other thing is if this ridge line is brought out to match with the differential, then most of the time that's a spicer transmission. That's your easy 5-second junkyard way to figure it out. Now, one of the big things about drag racing, a lot of you have ended up asking me, is everything with drag racing is weight versus horsepower. If you take a very small little car and you put a big giant motor in it, you have a heck of a weight to horsepower ratio. And that is what drag racing is about. So, let's find out exactly how much this weighs. Now, do keep in mind, this is the aluminum case version, which means if you had a Sears Suburban, yours would weigh way more than that because it's cast iron. So we've got everything we took out for this, and we've got this assembly that's going back in. Now we're going to find out on this scale what it is that they actually weigh. Alright, most of the time we're doing out with the old, in with the new, but in today's episode we're doing out with the new, in with the old. So the MST with all its shifting stuff is 39.6 pounds. And now the 633 on today's episode of Lift with Your Knees, not with your back. Do as I say, not as I do. Okay, that's much heavier. That would be 70 pounds, 70.4 pounds. So most of the time the idea is to go backwards in weight and get lighter, but we're getting heavier. We'll see if that ends up biting us later. On the other hand, we have lost almost 60 pounds worth of weight by switching over to the Weed Eater from a GT6000. So we're gaining about 40 pounds, but we've already lost 60. So we're still down 20 pounds in the end. The other thing is the hood, the pan, and the seat. Once we end up having the Weed Eater versus GT6000 on all of those, and we got the seat of all its foam, that drops another 15 pounds sometimes, depending on waterlog. So at that point, we're already dropping a good solid 70 to 80 pounds on this. So the next thing is we're going to fit this into there so you can see the general concept, and then we'll call it good for today till I get this mounted. Alright, so if I shine the light down here, we can see that this is where the pulley is, and that this is going to fit in between. It actually turns out the AYP frame is actually about a 1/4 inch wider than the GT6000 frame was. So I'm actually going to have to put spacers in here in order to get this to work. So this should bolt up just fine here, but the big deal is this pulley. So that pulley is in from the frame into just about right in this area, which means that this motor, in order to be able to line up, I've actually got to set it at least almost into this vicinity, which means that I've got to drop this in the frame. I've got to C-channel the frame in the front most likely in order to be able to get it low enough for the hood to clear, to be able to run down the frame, and then I still got to manage to get it to go around the steering gear. So that's where I'm at now. If you guys have any ideas, feel free to throw them down in the comments. Feel free to email me if you don't like commenting. I understand. And thanks for supporting this build. Have a good day.